Can you bring us a boost of energy?
Well, it's nice outside.
It's pretty. Much to the disappointment of all the school children who wanted to be snowed out.
Right. Though nowadays they could often just do work from home. They don't get the same school days they used to. All right, we're good.
All right, it's great to see everybody. We can get started. I think our first item on the agenda, as usual, is to approve the minutes from the last meeting on November 2nd. Does anybody have any proposed changes to the minutes that we need to consider? Then can I get a motion to approve the minutes from November 2nd?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passed. We don't have any old business today, but we do have a fair amount of new business to go over. So I want to get started with the site visit debrief from the past grant cycle. As Sarah suggested, I think we should go around the room and on Zoom and talk about the process, how we found the process, if there were any special takeaways that we had from the site visits, talking about ones that really touched you, were important, and also talking about ways to improve the site visit process for next year. So we're always looking for ideas on how to streamline it, make it easier, or make it more in-depth. So you want to start? Mark, do you want to start? We'll go around.
Sure. I had an opportunity to go to a number of site visits. I enjoyed all of them. I think they were all a reflection of the different organizations. So they were, all presented a little differently. I can't think of any cons or criticism to give. I feel like everyone got information and guidelines ahead of time. And even though each site visit was unique, I feel like everyone presented well and did a good job of explaining what they were doing, what their impact goals were, and what their financial goals were. And I felt like it was very satisfactory. So I think that's a reflection of the effort of the staff communicating and putting the information in their hands. I was impressed with all the site visits that I attended.
Yes, I've been to a couple. I might have missed one. I couldn't figure out what it was, and I couldn't figure out where it was, where I had to go. And I apologize. Anyway, we went to the physical legal, and of course, it's such an impressive organization. They gave a very good talk. I was especially impressed. They said they have a person at the courthouse on days when there are evictions going on in the department who's bilingual in Spanish. And with someone, a lot of people don't have access to internet or the knowledge that physical legal is there to help them. They're there, and so they're just waiting to somebody's being evicted, they'll talk. I thought that was a very impressive thing. Then we went to the child care center over. You were there, Sarah, where the children were having a terrific time running around.
Yeah.
Right for Halloween. Yeah. And it was such a, they seem to be doing a really good job there. I can't remember the name.
That was Read to Succeed.
Read to Succeed, yes.
Yeah.
And they had a community center there, right? Burton Street.
I think it was.
Anyway, they did great.
Kate and I went to William County School Foundation, you were the tour.
Yes.
And I thought it was incredibly impressive. I mean, the extent of where they try to wrap around services to homeless families and kids. And of course, the number of homeless kids in William County is pretty astounding. I mean, you have to get past that emotionally to hear what else they've got to say. Their enthusiasm is amazing. We toured their food kitchen, or their food pantry. They've got a great thrift store where folks can go in and just shop for whatever they need. It's very clean, very organized. And it was really impressive, and it was great to see kind of everything they did. Also, they talked about just going out the day before and helping a homeless family put a tent up to live in, you know, and it's just pretty interesting. I mean, it's across the board. But then we flipped over to ASAP. You know, their program was equally impressive, and they were very enthusiastic about their work. And of course, they're teaching kids where their food comes from, equally important in a different way, not nearly as gut-wrenching as William County School Foundation's work, but still both, I think, two very impressive organizations that really are working hard to make the world a better place.
I felt similarly positive about the meetings that I had. I wasn't able to attend any in person, but did a few virtually. We did have technical issues on a few of them. I don't know if there's anything to do about that, because I think it depends on the other, who else, the technology kind of. But otherwise it seemed to work really well. And I think the presentations were extremely helpful. I've actually run into people that I met virtually since then, and have been able to, the working wheels. I'm so able to, just say, hey, we met, so that was nice. Yeah, I just think it's really helpful to have that face to face. So I don't know that I would change anything about it.
I guess same here. I mean, I guess I went to 4 or 5, and most of them were in person. And I hadn't gone to many in person because of COVID before, so this was really nice. And it's a totally different experience, especially for organizations where you can actually experience what's going on directly. And for me, the most meaningful one was the Haywood Street Congregation Open Table, because of just the incredibly negative context in which the news and media hosts homeless people in Asheville, and there was a place where they were welcome, they were respected, offered a lot of diverse services that they might need. So that was really very, incredibly informative and kind of life-changing for me. I just started to view the world a little bit differently.
Anne actually articulated much better than I could how impressive Buncombe County School Foundation was, all of the services that they offer, how they're just trying to serve people in so many ways. And so that really impressed me. And also ASAP, connecting farmers with children so that they can learn where their food comes from, how to grow food. I think that's something that's falling away with sort of development coming in more and more to Buncombe County and the farmland being brought up for development. So I thought it was impressive that they were trying to educate kids so that they don't lose that connection to the farmers in the area. And some of them might choose to be farmers someday, and that's impressive. Ray, what about you?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I did 7 site visits, I think, and the last stretch of them were really impactful. I think you guys have spoken about Family Resource Center, which serves homeless students in Buncombe County schools, also Helpmate, also the YWCA Mother Love program, which is pregnant students. So I found the end of them, I was getting kind of emotional in them, which I had not experienced before. So that was interesting. One process improvement, I've discussed it with Sarah, is that when we get materials beforehand, although the quarterly report is great, and that kind of thing, the contract, I think we get the contract as well, which for me personally isn't especially helpful. What I'd love to see is the original grant application. So I can see what we had seen on the front end and kind of marry it with what we're seeing in person or on the back end. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for that feedback, Ray. And a big thank you to everyone who participated in site visits this year. I know that this is something that we ask the committee if it's something you're interested in doing each year, and I would recommend just taking note of what was said in this space today as we, get through the application period and recommendations, and then we start looking at process improvements for next year, and deciding if site visits are still something that the committee wants to do. But for now, just a really big thank you for participating in those, and several folks jumping in last minute to cover some, or just being really diligent about signing up and attending several of them. And I just really appreciate all of you for that.
Our next order of business is to finalize the fiscal year 2025 materials, the grant guideline changes as it relates to application scoring criteria and moving from grant workshops to grant fair. So has everyone had an opportunity to look at the proposed changes? And I know that Kathy has some feedback that she sent in on that. And does anybody have any feedback, any positive or negative thoughts on those proposed changes highlighted as it relates to the grants fair, the need for the project, the geography served?
Yeah, so as you're looking at the draft grant guidelines document for FY25, you'll see that there are some areas that are highlighted in yellow, and those are the areas where we made changes to the grant guidelines. So for this year, we did include language about applying for other county grants, that projects can only be funded. Do you see that? Do I need to make it bigger? A little bit, okay. They can only apply for funding from one county grant program. And previously, what we've said about that is if we receive an application for a project that might fit better in another community investment grant program, we can refer the application, but come to find out, we actually cannot make that happen just due to the differences in application questions. The dates of open applications don't necessarily align. There's just a lot of different challenges with that. And so we want to make it really clear to folks that we won't be able to refer your application. So really choose wisely in which grant program you're going to apply to for that project. I'll run through each of these and then we can discuss any of them. The other change is adding in the grants fair, and this is going to take place on January 10th, 2024 from 4 to 6 p.m. here in the first floor conference room. And this is a new opportunity. Previously, what we've done is virtual grant writing workshops where staff hosts basically a virtual presentation via Zoom. It's recorded. We run through all of the information in the grant guidelines, and we post that online so that folks can access it as they want to or attend the virtual call itself. And this year, as we've been collaborating with other departments and other grant programs, we thought it might be a really nice change to have all of the community investment grant programs in one place at one time, to have all of the information there for potential grantees or applicants to come kind of shop around, talk to folks at different tables, ask questions, get material, grant guidelines and other materials that might be important for them, just comprehensively, so that they're not having to like dig for, oh, when's this grant writing workshop? Oh, I need to attend this 6th grant writing workshop this month. But just all in one place at one time. So we did add that.
Is that in addition to doing still offering the grant writing workshop?
This is in lieu of the grant writing workshops. We'll still offer the one-on-one grant consultation calls with staff. So that will still be available. And then moving into the application questions, these reflect some of the discussions that the committee has had as we were kind of reviewing our process last year and talking about any changes you want to see in the application this year to get the information that we want to see. So the first one was the need for the project. This one was brought up as we were brainstorming. So we changed this to what is the community need and purpose this project is established to address. Use data or qualitative factors to show the need and describe how this project fits with the county strategic plan focus areas and or goals. The second shift is with the geography served. And as you'll remember, we had lengthy conversations about this one. And we heard from the folks in planning about the equity mapping tool and how we might be able to utilize that in our process. So the proposed change that we have for this question is, how do your services meet the resource needs of your area? Asking them to use that community index map to look up their service areas to help assist in their description of resource needs in each location. And then asking them if their project will serve the entire county versus specific locations. And I think those were the big changes, and the rest pretty much carries over. So going through that, sorry for all the scrolling, not trying to make anyone dizzy. I'd like to open it up for any conversation as you look at those and hear about them. How do these feel to you? Is there anything that needs to be tweaked or changed with them before moving forward and posting them?
Sarah, do we have, in regards to project need, do we have a question somewhere in the application about who else is providing this service? So if someone has said, oh, well, there's not enough homeless services, let's do another something or whatever it is. Do we have that question anywhere in the application? Seems like that'd be an important question. So we'd know whether or not this is kind of an add-on. Our organization doesn't think that you're doing enough of this and we want to do more of that.
Yeah, we don't currently have that asked or reflected. So would that be like asking the applicant to let us know what other organizations might be doing that kind of work?
I mean, I think that it could provide some insight. I mean, I think it's just more food for thought for us. It's like, it seems like sometimes we don't need yet another organization going after 10 other groups that's trying to fix a problem. If you want to add more money, just give it to one of those organizations if they're doing good work and meeting their needs. That's kind of the basis, the backstory of that question for me at least. So just food for thought. I'm not married to that, but it's just what popped into my head around when you were reading that part.
So possible wording, who else in the community is providing this service and how does this program fit in or connect?
Yeah.
That might also feed into the geography served part of, there might be these other organizations providing these services, but not in these specific areas.
So I missed the meeting where we all discussed geography, but I guess the one question I have is that maybe some organizations where there might be a central location like the diaper bank, right? But that's really doesn't reflect well the services, I mean, where the areas where the services are provided, because the diapers are distributed to a lot of different places. So I assume there's gonna be an opportunity for applicants to say, well, this doesn't really apply directly to us. This is where our office is located, where our diaper bank, but it doesn't necessarily reflect in any way that areas that we serve.
And I think that's what we've been trying to hone in on more, because in previous iterations, we have asked, like, what's your primary business location or like service location? Which, like you're saying, Liz, only gives us one pinpoint in where their office is located potentially, and not actually where their services are located within the county. So I think with the change this year in the geography served question, we're trying to better understand not only where their services are being offered, but looking deeper at the resource needs in those particular areas and like, you know, is this, if we're looking at that community index map and you see, oh, there's an abundance of this here, yet this service is, you know, being offered here. Is that something that potentially is as high impact as another service that's being offered in a different chapter area where they don't have opportunities for that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't like, and I don't have this exact proposal, but I think that question 5 could be tweaked a little bit because you're asking for an address. And in cases where that's just like a central or an office, that's central, but it doesn't directly serve people, but it just is the office where the staff goes to work. Maybe we need to clarify more if services are not directly given in the, or we understand that services, you know, whether services are performed in that location or not, we want to know where the headquarters of the organization is. So maybe there's a way to phrase that where it would be a little clearer. If organizations are not providing services at the location, that's the address.
And who their community partners are. So do I have to go downtown to get diapers, or can I get diapers at my local church or? Okay.
Yeah, and it's interesting, I mean, I think we cover a lot of that in our, there's another question where we talk about collaborations, I think. So I think that's probably pretty well covered.
So how about calling it service locations? And say if they're
Describe your
delivered
service
in
location.
person, list the addresses? We want the description too, but we also need to be able to map it, right?
I would ask where the office is, where does your administrator work out of? And also where people can, their service locations, I mean, both of those, we need both of those. But that may be addressed with the community partners.
But I think that is clearer, because I think there are some organizations where they're really, they don't have, their administrative office does not correspond to where the services are delivered. And so that kind of clarifies that.
I wonder if we could also just ask for the zip codes where they're located.
Maybe it depends on whether you have dots on the map.
Right, that's what I'm thinking about.
To ask for addresses if we're gonna try to map them.
And also a zip code, you could be on the very edge of 28805 and versus a specific pinpoint for an address.
So change primary location to service locations. We'll have the agency address in the intro. So this will be, if services are delivered in person, list the addresses for locations, for service locations. Is there any objection to that change?
My only concern is that there could be more than one.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
We expect that there will be on many of them.
So take out primary so that they can put
maybe, yeah, just
multiple.
maybe let them have a look. I don't know.
Yeah.
Service locations.
We had some that are at like all the elementary schools.
Yeah, right. So how do we answer that question?
They'll, I guess, have to list each elementary school's address.
Yeah.
So the name and address of each location.
And the address can be a PO box,
Name and physical address.
Yes.
physical address.
We also, in the next question, number 6, say include if your project will serve the entire county versus specific locations. I'm wondering if that,
Which question, number?
number 6, the last sentence.
And that question is interesting because using the diaper, you know, if we have a diaper bank in the middle of downtown, sure, we'll provide diapers to anybody in Buncombe County, but they have to go get them. You know, that kind of thing.
It's so complicated.
This is always the complicated one.
Where the rubber meets the road.
I think asking for service locations, regardless of how many there are.
So, sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, I can't remember, one of the after-school programs we went to had 3 locations. They're all within the city of Asheville, so they might be hesitant to say, well, we don't serve all of them. But we do serve multiple communities.
I think this change will capture where they work out of, where where the people reside, who they serve, and where the services happen.
So on the question, we did say, if services are provided in person, please list the physical address for each location. That way they know to list all of them.
Yes.
And that way it would be the physical address and not the PO box.
And the only thing I had on my notes that's different than what you said was the name and physical address.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Name if it's applicable.
We're trying to do one size fits all, like, is that a fire station address? Is it a school address? Is it their salary office? We have so many different types of programs that are funded through one grant. It's hard to take this and think like, well, how would a water quality organization answer this versus how would a food program answer this? There was another change on the table before we went to geography, which was Anne's suggestion around adding a question, who else in the community is providing the service and how does the program fit in? I wanted to make sure that we're clear if that's a change we're adding.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I'm again a little worried about the scope and clarity because for some organizations, how do you define this service? You know, how narrowly do you define the service? Because there may be 10 agencies in the community or 20 or 30 providing services homeless, but they're talking about a specific niche. And let's say that, like the welcome table, and you know, the Hayward County Current Congregation. You know, I think it could be helpful in some cases to identify duplicate services, but it may be difficult in others.
I think I would say if I was gonna put a welcome table in, you know, Fairview, for example, if there's, and I don't know anything about that, but if, you know, I would say, you know, the closest welcome table to this community is 30 miles away, no public transportation, you know, and I could justify why my add-on was needed, kind of thing.
Yeah, so you're kind of thinking that they should define it as relatively narrowly,
Yeah.
So that it doesn't become a fit universe of potential other organizations. That makes sense.
And that would fall under the need for the project question.
I was hearing another question. Are you saying another section to answer within the need question?
I withdraw my question. You know, it's just what popped into my head because I know frequently, I've done it myself as a nonprofit director. It's like, you know, we need more of this and I can do this and kind of thing. And so I just think that it's a way for us to, when I read grant applications, I think the more information we can read, the better we can make a choice about things. And so, I mean, I'm not married to it.
So-
It just seems like in my brain, that would be the obvious next question. You know, and the answer may be nobody, and that's what I mean, it's not what we hope for, but, you know, it well could be nobody. You know, I mean, for example, Meals on Wheels. You know, if someone said, I wanna start a Meals on Wheels route in, Sandy Mush, for example, you know, who else is providing Meals on Wheels services? Well, Buncombe County Meals on Wheels is, but they don't have an area, they don't have a route in Sandy Mush. And so, you know, what I'd say to them is, well, have you contacted, we could go on for this forever, but you know, it's like, maybe they have a total great idea for a Meals on Wheels route in Sandy Mush and total rationale why we should fund that, because it's just out there, you know, it's not a route down South Ridgebrook Avenue kind of thing, and so.
So that makes sense, and hearing what Sarah heard,
Right.
what I think I'm saying back is you're suggesting to add that as an additional question that they answer as part of their number 4.
Yes, that's what I would do.
Is there any hesitation from others about that?
Hey, this is Ray. Sorry,
Hey,
I don't know how to jump in from
jump on in, that's perfect.
remotely, so I'm going to jump in. I agree philosophically and intellectually with everything Anne's saying. I just every time we add something, we make it a harder process. And I know over years, you know, there have been times where organizations regard the county grant processes as difficult and challenging to navigate and get through. And I know the county staff has worked really hard to make them more accessible. So just the more layers we add on, even if it's good information for us, we have to be a little careful with that, just to make sure there aren't too many layers that make just an obstructive process to apply for grants or a less accessible process for applying for grants. So I just want to jump in with that as a little kind of remote aside.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I was thinking is maybe we could ask them, are you aware of other organizations performing similar services, and can you explain why this is not duplicative? Because that way they don't feel like they have to go out and, you know, search the universe to make sure they identify all of them. But really, by the point they're writing this application, they should be aware of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that is the point, is that the point that, good point. I'm not a fan of that, but that is the point. They should be aware. You know, I find that so many people, it's like, oh, I'm gonna start a nonprofit. Well, without doing a lot of homework. And it's kind of the same, it goes down to, oh, I'm gonna start a new program. And I think they need to do the homework, especially before they start asking for taxpayers' funding, just to make sure it's not duplicated.
So is that the language we want to include in that question? Are you aware of?
I like the second part of that, Liz. I was thinking in my brain asking about like the uniqueness of their program or project. So I think that is like, I don't know, it sounds more positive language wise to me.
How is your program different, maybe?
From similar services.
Oh, yeah,
already
amazing.
provided.
So, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Sounds good.
Do you have that language?
I have a few different choices. Hearing Ray's comment about keeping it simple and making sure we're not adding barriers. The simplest way I heard that worded just now was, how is this project different from similar services? But that's a little confusing.
You know, maybe we
And I
should
was
just do this.
suggesting that you start out with, are you aware of other organizations performing similar services?
And how is this project different?
Yeah.
Are you aware of other organizations providing similar services? And how is this project different?
You could even say in your area. That would be, I mean, that gets, I mean,
Yeah, you
Yeah.
probably need to say.
yeah.
Or in your circle.
Got it.
This is Ray again. One more thing, just to be clear, we do have a lot of organizations that overlap in what they do, and we just do, and that will continue. So sometimes it's a qualitative distinction rather than does it exist. And then, you know, I guess as a grant committee, we sometimes have to decide who's doing something well or better when we're making determinations. But I think I think it's a slippery slope for asking more and more along these lines. So I think the broader question is the best approach.
I think it may help us. We've talked about wanting to fund innovative projects, smaller projects. And I think the question will help us identify those. If they can specify how their services are different. You know. Just kind of
I also think that this question has been very broad and vague in the past, and part of what I've heard as a discussion from this committee is trying to like utilize it for its greatest potential in the application process. So I think this is a helpful. Any other thoughts on that one? Need for the project? Or geography served? We also have a note on primary location.
Technical comment, you can add a link to the community.
Yeah, we have that currently in the, you can't see it up there. It's hyperlinked.
That's a good suggestion. We could link the strategic plan as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe we already.
So those are our question about the grants fair. So what exactly does that replace in terms of the prior process?
We were holding these sessions called grant writing workshops. The name isn't probably a perfect match to what would occur. It was more of an information session. And we would hold one per grant program. And people could sign up and we would do a presentation and verbally explain everything that's in the grant guidelines. So this is the purpose of the grant, this is the eligibility, and talk it through. We added a little bit of additional information about some tips, but mostly it was an information session. And we think that we can accomplish that by opening up a time that people can come and offer the same information session. Just an idea.
Is there someone who can help somebody make a good decision about where to submit their application there, so they have somebody they can connect with to and say, hey, I think this is best for this program? Yeah, and I think that was the other part of doing this like in person all together is with the grant writing workshops, and even just the way we've done it before, like the information is all kind of siloed and you have to search for it, and it's all on different websites, and we have had some struggles with like eligibility fits in the different grant programs, and since we can't refer, we want to find the best ways to clearly communicate that. And I think, I'm hoping that this grants fair will be an opportunity, you know, if someone comes to strategic partnerships table and they're asking about their eligibility or a grant that a project they're looking to fund, and we can see like, okay, you're looking at like homelessness or affordable housing, we can then say, there's your table right there.
A popular and really valuable offering that we have is the consultation sessions. So there's a link where people can book a 30-minute slot with staff, and that's open and one-on-one essentially, where we encourage them to ask any type of question, pitch their idea, ask about where they're stuck, because we aren't evaluators. It lets the staff be free to point out things that we notice. Hey, we've heard the committee talk a lot about this or that, and I don't hear you mention that. Have you thought about just helping them be well prepared to navigate the process?
I think that's great. I think the fair is great for the networking opportunity, the one-stop shop, the face-to-face. Ray's comment about accessibility. Reviewing applications last year, it was very obvious, some people had a tremendous amount of experience with this process and other people not as much. I really want to understand your answer a little better. So there's a way to put an asterisk or emphasize, on the application, please. Provide this service. Really encouraging people. And not resources. That's important.
Yeah, it's a little buried in the grant guidelines itself because it reads a little bit like a multi-page, notice of funding document. But when we do like our articles and our outreach, we try to put that stuff in there up front. Right, sorry, I was looking the other way.
You don't need to be sorry. Whoops. Oh, good, Aman. You don't need to be sorry at all. From when it was presented, and now I happen to be at home, so I'm able to pull up the community index maps in each area. They're incredibly complicated and convoluted. I think we either need to say county staff will assist, and good luck with that county staff, as people are identifying these areas, which is done in lots of different ways with the color and the zip codes and the lines, and it's actually pretty confusing. Or we might try to simplify the option about geography served. I think the community index map can give some information to people, but trying to translate what they do and where they serve it onto those maps, I would find extremely onerous, and people will be very confused by it. But I want to express that concern.
You could say it's applicable to your request. You know what I'm saying? So that they they're. Yeah, so it's an
Like
option.
you
but I-
may instead of please.
Yeah,
If helpful.
yeah. I think it's good for people to look at that because it gives them some information.
It gives us data that
Yeah.
we don't have.
But I like the idea of not necessarily making it required because there may be a service that doesn't make sense.
How will the zip codes correspond to the different different voting districts? Is it completely
It's
inconclusive?
in flux, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I will say I convinced, I looked at those maps and I'm an epidemiologist. I gave up really quickly. I said, well, I'm sorry I wasn't there for the demonstration because it's really hard. So I do think we need to provide a couple of ways for them to identify, their geography. List the communities or something, I don't know.
We're asking them to assist in the description of resource needs in each location. So they can use the map as a reference, as an option. Trying to think it through, sorry.
What if we flip this question around and started it with, will your project serve the entire county? Or specific locations within it? Describe how your project meets the resource needs of your area. And then introduces this tool as something that could help provide info on resource needs.
And then hopefully, when people call for consultations, if they need help with the map, you can provide it, I guess.
Or maybe, if does it need to be, if it needs to be on that, then, somebody just lists their addresses and somebody, again, staff can put that on the, online.
But I get the message I'm getting is that one of the reasons you want to use the map is to be able to say, this is high poverty, this community is high poverty, it's X% non-white. You're asking them to describe a little bit about the demographics of the community, which listing the addresses doesn't really.
Yeah, and some of these are advantages.
So I wrote it down. Let me read it again. Will your project serve the entire county or specific areas within it? How will the project meet the specific resource needs for your area or areas? If helpful, you may use the community index map.
Using headphones. Any head shakes?
Does that feel better, Ray? Thumbs up.
It does. That's much better. Thank you.
And we accept your wishes of good luck on consultations on the complicated matter.
And then, I mean, this is just a suggestion, but you guys could consider having a little tutorial online. For how to use the app.
I think there is one.
Yeah, they
Okay.
do have.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that link has a video.
Yes, you may want to let them know that tutorial exists.
This is Ray. The map is highly wonky. Like, it's not that it's not interesting. I find it fascinating, but you have to spend a lot of time with it really to dedupe it and to access it. And that makes, if we require it, that would make the whole program less accessible.
Yeah, I think making it optional is critical.
Are there any other application questions or components of the grant guidelines that we didn't highlight that you see as problematic or have any proposed changes to? So the scoring criteria is also part of the grant guidelines. And that is something that we have tweaked over the last couple of years to make it more robust and kind of transparent on the evaluation side for folks who are applying to see the scoring matrix and what you all as reviewers are going to be looking at as you score. Any questions or concerns with that portion? Bring it up on the screen, but it's very small.
What I notice is the geography is not scored.
It's for data collection only.
So it's for helpful information for us to look at the portfolio, but it's not scored. So that takes a little bit of the pressure off of trying to like get the index map part right. If they do choose to use it, we're not penalizing a group that doesn't choose to use it.
I think that's a really good thing because if you're going to score it, you have to define the criteria. It's going to be fun.
Right.
So the pieces that are being scored currently are the need for the project, project plan, post results, capacity, equity, and budget.
This is Ray. Just to point out something, I think in the application, organizations or applicants define their definition of equity. What is your definition of equity, I think is asked. But there's also a county definition of equity. So then when we're judging it, it's very subjective what lens we're looking at. Am I looking at Ray's definition of equity, the county's definition of equity, or the organization's definition of equity? Subjectivity may be okay in this area, but I'm just kind of pointing it out. It's not really an objective standard.
We tried to write it so it was neutral. if they have a definition of net equity and they've given it some thought and work to incorporate it, that's how to get points.
Totally understand, and I respect that, and I think it's probably necessary. At the same time, it's not holding it to, say, the county standard of equity, and definitions of equity can be very soft. They can basically be equality, which is different than equity. Not that I object to that, an equality definition actually, but it's to make the distinction. And so if an organization defines equity as equality and then they hold themselves to that standard, we might be giving them a high score, but it may not be meeting the county's definition of equity. I hope that makes sense. I'm not actually really asking to change it. I just wanted to point out that it's a difficult area to judge if organizations are asserting a certain value that's not consistent with the county's or ours as a committee or ours as individuals. How are we judging them? And I think that is subjective, and maybe it's okay that it's subjective.
Ray, do you have a proposed change to the application question language? Or was that more of an observation?
It was more an observation that it's subjective, and even the Buncombe County defines equity as the state of being just, impartial, and fair. You can tease that in a lot of different directions. Although I appreciate the final sentence actually, because that's kind of interesting, and the word improved is interesting. I'm sure you guys engage that in all sorts of interesting ways along the way, but it just kind of evidences that different organizations then are being kind of held to different standards that they're putting forward themselves or different standards from us. So it's not an easy thing to resolve, and maybe it's something where we should one day have a meeting just focused on this. But I don't know that this committee is going to be especially qualified or have the capacity to resolve this question that really exists across lots of organizations and in society. So to answer Sarah, to answer your question, I'm not actually proposing a change. It is just to be aware of that that it's soft and malleable.
Yep. Any other last minute thoughts or questions or concerns about any of?
I've had a lot of conversation about bias towards larger organizations. And the language in the capacity section kind of, I think, may lend itself towards that bias. It's almost a capability question more than it is a capacity question if we're looking at a small entity that's trying to implement, a new project. So just raising that as
In the scoring?
Yeah, the language that we're using in the scoring around structure, and if you're a really small new organization, you're not gonna have the same kind of structure as the legal, right? So I don't know if there's stuff we can add to that language or.
Our intent was to look for structure relative to their proposed idea.
Yeah.
We do need to be setting projects up to succeed.
Yeah.
And putting funding where it has a good chance of being carried out.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there's ways we could adjust it to maybe organizational history is less important, that could go. So is it a good idea? And then also, will it work? This is like, will it work?
Yeah.
Do you want to take a look at it? We could chat
I
later.
don't know. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts about it. It's just something we talked a lot about, and we haven't really addressed that piece of the tendency to score, well-established organizations.
it's tough, like one of the, in the proposed results, we want them to have methods for measuring their results.
Yeah.
And that is a more sophisticated organization that's got like a tracking plan already. And if they haven't given that thought yet, it's gonna be tough for us
Right.
at the start, trying to build that. And support them as they come up with the plan.
I was just at the local government budget association conference earlier today and was presenting with someone from a larger county who also has community service grant programs, and they were saying that they just don't grant out funds to like smaller grassroots organizations, period. And it's for the sole reason of like making sure, like the accountability piece of government funds, which is obviously not how we operate, and we very much are kind of take an opposite approach of wanting to ensure that all organizations, no matter the size or scale, have an opportunity to access local government funds. There still is that accountability piece that it's like a risk mitigation piece that we have to be cognizant of.
I mean, maybe you say something like the organization has the structure and the capability of the partnerships required to succeed in the implementation of the project.
Structure, capability, and or partnerships.
And or partnerships. Because then that would, I mean, if it's a smaller, newer program, it might also help them articulate how they're gonna work with others, or, what other ways they're gonna achieve this.
Is there any sort of assessment that might disqualify an organization from applying for a grant? For failure of the projects that's going on?
If you contracted with them?
Yes.
In very rare circumstances, we have notified organizations that they're not eligible to do business with us until certain criteria are met. When we've tried really hard to work with an organization to get them to a certain level and they haven't been able to demonstrate that, to prove the funds are being used for the public purpose that they're granted for. So, but it's not a tool we don't get that far very often.
But on the help,
I mean, we've had applicants for really like 1 or 2 people, and like there's what's structure related to that, I mean, I guess you have some, but it could be, it's pretty small.
I captured the proposed language and we can look to how to fit that in across the 1 to 5 spectrum.
All right, before we move on to our final agenda item, any last thoughts or questions? And we'll say, as Rachel offered, if you leave this meeting and you're still thinking about things and you're like, oh, it's like something comes to you, there's a light bulb moment, feel free to reach out to us. We are finalizing these in the next week or so, as soon as possible, since things are going live in a couple weeks, less than 2 weeks. But happy to have those conversations. Last agenda item.
Yes. Last item before announcements is potential changes to eligibility criteria for fiscal year 2026, which county staff has summarized for us under FY26 proposed changes.
And one more thing that we didn't highlight in the grant guidelines for you all, but we have tweaked a bit just until the budget is finalized for FY25. We put in a range for this grant program since we heard the committee requesting additional funds. So the range is it says estimated to be 900,000 to $1 million for this fund, and that's obviously something that we'll have to see if the commissioners adopt that into the budget, but I wanted to note that that request is being made.
We're submitting it as part of the departmental budget request and doing some justification around it, and it's a really solid case. The amount of total funds requested in this program in proportion to the amount that is available to grant is, help me explain this better. There's that ratio.
So you guys are able to fund a smaller percent of the
Thank you.
request than any other grant program. So
That's over the last 4 years since
Yes.
this meeting.
So there's a good case to be made. And we'll make it.
So then, as Kate was saying, we did include something in here, which is even farther down the road, FY26, but didn't want it to go unmentioned since at some of our previous brainstorming meetings, we've talked about the potential for changing the eligibility criteria, which has historically been an organization applying with the same project for 3 years has to then change the project that they're applying for or not apply for that same project. And the committee has had conversations about changing that to an organizational level. So instead of a project being funded for 3 years and then a shift or a pause, an organization, if it has been funded for 3 years through this grant program, would have to take a 1-year pause before reapplying. And the rationale behind that was to allow for more organizations, especially some of the smaller ones that we might be getting or seeing. You know, we see some of the larger organizations in the community receiving these funds year over year for multiple years in a row, because they have they have more ability to propose different projects or fund different programs. So this would give more of an opportunity for other folks to receive funding. It's not the hard and fast, like 3 years and you're cut off. It's just a 1-year pause or moratorium. And Ray brought up that it would be helpful to have a runway for that to go into effect instead of just having that be effective for the FY25 grant cycle, where we're kind of cutting some organizations off at the knees potentially. Having a year to be able to effectively communicate that with folks and be more intentional about sharing that information. So we are proposing that be something that the committee looks to in FY26. And I wanted to bring that to the committee because it is something that would have to go and be approved by the Board of Commissioners ultimately. So we wanted to make sure that it was first coming to the committee and that there was consensus here before elevating it any further. Ray, did I do you justice?
You did a lovely job. We have talked about this as a committee, but we haven't made a decision around runway stuff. For me, it's just making sure that because we do fund some of the, especially larger organizations, larger projects, year after year, that they have some time to plan adequately for alternate grant funding or just alternate fund sourcing.
I think my assumption was that if we did that, which I was okay with, it would just start effectively the year it was announced and run forward 3 years without any historical precedent. So already been in 3 years, now you're out, just starting here was my assumption. But I was thinking about specifics.
Yeah, we have talked about this through the years, really. And, I can see I mean, it would just be easier if they said you can fund this organization for 3 years. It's certainly easier.
Yeah.
But again, you don't want to have bias against the larger organizations because some of them do a very good job and they have the capacity to do a good job. And year after year. So I'd be a little hesitant about it. And I think we can, we're all intelligent people here and look these things over carefully. We can make decisions, if they doesn't look like a good idea or if they're not doing a good job, we don't have to fund them.
You would think if we want to fund somebody year over year, it would just become a line item on the budget. Like it's sort of weird that they have, what?
We have talked about that too. I think we even asked them about that. Why don't, y'all should really be funding this automatically, but no, they turned this over to us, so.
I think there was one where that did happen. Water quality.
The water quality.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
They took it back.
Department has to want to put it in their budget.
And so what is the process to make that happen? If we know there needs to be a funding stream for an organization long-term because of it.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a tension.
Yeah.
The department had, let's say we're talking health and human services.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of things fit. In the philosophical definition of what's health and human services, something might fit.
Mm-hmm.
Like a basic need type service, like obviously might fit. The lens that they're using is the legislative mandates. Here's what counties must do, and that's their top priority for their limited resources, and then here's what counties can do, and the level of indirectness to the direct services they provide. So Health and Human Services has foster care, they have certain health programs, and if it's directly related to that, putting it in their budget, they can defend or justify. And if it's indirect, then essentially that we're saying, yes, it's important in the community, but no, it's not important to the operation of that department.
I think one of the pain points that I've voiced repeatedly is fiscal legal. And I think that's a classic example of something where it makes sense to have it in the budget. It provides critically vital services that actually alleviates some other needs. Like if you keep a family from being homeless because you offer them legal services, then one less family that's homeless. But maybe if we cut them off for a year, that'll increase pressure on the department to put them in their budget. I don't know, I still have some ambivalence about the concept of organizations offer you. I'm not opposed to it, I'm just a little ambivalent, but the only good thing I can say about it is maybe it would increase political pressure to put things in the budget that should be in the budget.
Well, and with one of the headlines this morning, Buncombe County says debts are increasing faster than revenues. It's like, makes me wonder about, anybody else getting in the budget for foreseeable future. But it seems to make sense that, if this committee doesn't fund someone for more than 3 years, and yet we feel like, our own rule has really, we wish we could just eliminate the rule for this organization, then maybe it's one of the things that we do. We go to the commissioners and we say, this organization is worthy. This is why. We've been watching them for 3 years. This is a great project, kind of thing. Maybe that's a partnership that
Might be the only meeting.
maybe that's a partnership that we need to create ourselves.
So that particular organization is worth another conversation. And your point is well taken. Let's not look at our overall guidelines and try to design them around a particular instance. That is an organization that has received county funding for years and years and years. It was direct, and it was discontinued as a direct budget line. And we sort of received that into the competitive grant pool. And it's a little bit of a square peg. I think they have 2 grants, both at the maximum amount. So if you look at the percentage of the total 900,000 that's going to that one organization, it really does have a huge influence on this grant program. So I can take that back and have conversations with county management about just advice on that particular instance. The broader question is, do we want to pursue a change from capping 3 years to a project to the switch of 3 years to an organization, you're off and then eligible again?
I prefer not to box us in that way. And that keeps us from having to then single out ones that and go and ask for funding for them. I prefer to keep it the way that we have it, at least for the meantime. We can continue having conversations about it, but I think it makes sense to keep it the way it is right now.
I agree.
Hi. I respect Kate to no end and all the rest of you, but I strongly disagree for several reasons. Basically some of the larger organizations have permanent funding through this program, and that doesn't strike me as appropriate. It doesn't strike me as healthy for them either. By having that 3-year cutoff, they have to do their planning to include funding from other sources rather than being reliant on us. Also, because we have such large entities that get money from us year to year, that really does block out other organizations from accessing funds. And so it becomes things that I think correctly in the room were said as, these should just be a part of county budget because they're basic functionings of government. And I agree with that. Like, I think they should be, but they're not. But we're treating it like they are for something that could go away at any time. That's not healthy for the organizations, and it's blocking other organizations from participating in county funding.
I haven't completely made up my mind to understand most arguments. Here back and forth, but my perspective on this grant and the reason the application is the way it is for specific projects and not to be used to fund an organization's operational costs. It's to help large organizations and small organizations get the financial injection they need for a specific project to meet a specific need and get it up off the ground or get it to the next step. So having that philosophical idea of what this grant is about, the more money we can get to more projects to get going feels better. And when we're giving funding to the same organizations and using it for similar projects over and over, it seems like it limits some of that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my concern. But I still haven't been on my mind. I still feel on the fence about this.
I think the
It sounds
funding
like-
cap was sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it sounds like we don't have to decide today. Doug mentioned that it would be simpler on the staff side. We have a hard time knowing like the difference between what a project is. Is this a different project or is this the same project? So because we do it at the project level, it's tricky. I also wanted to say I pulled up the list of organizations that have been funded 3 years straight at the organization level, and there are 11 of them, and they're not all large organizations. It's a mix.
So is there language, I mean, I know there's language around what the commissioners and visions committee is, but we always talk about, the principle that this is really to fund startup activities. Is that really written anywhere? I mean, when I think of the term strategic partnerships, the way I think of it is a little different. It's like, these are the partnerships that the county is relying on to meet their objectives. So I guess it would be good to see, is the intent of the commissioners really for us is primarily to be kind of seed money for new projects? Or is it, to make, to identify the most important needs of the county that are not met in other ways? It'd be good to know that.
It's more the latter. I haven't seen a priority for newness. we've talked about innovation and approach, but not necessarily.
And we do have another grant program, Tipping Point, which is specifically for newer organizations or new projects to help tip them into that next phase of their operations.
Right, Sarah, but just to be clear, that caps at $5,000.
Right.
So a lot of the applications we get to this program are of a different magnitude, so that program wouldn't really relate to that.
Do we have a way to have line of sight on there's a different new capacity for funding of some organizations and HSOs in our region just because of the Iowa Health Trust, Roach Foundation, foundations in the region, Healthy Opportunities. And so there should be some growing sustainability around that. I mean, I know it takes time, but also I really don't know. I know Trust actually, Fiscal Legal does get funding through all those other organizations as well. And other types of services may not be eligible for those funding resources.
We have asked about sustainability, what their plan is going forward.
I mean, Buncombe County, we have to remember that we're not the only funding source out there, as you just pointed out. You know, and most of these nonprofits have, I mean, we hope they have donors, we hope they have a wide variety of funding in place. I mean, you know, if we cut an organization off after 3 years and they already get money from Buncombe County, from Buncombe County's budget, you know, or from another grant, they're gonna say, we lost this funding and we're trying to replace it, and they'll increase the request to Buncombe County directly or to another organization and so forth. I mean, I think for us, you know, it's about who's meeting the most needs in the community, the needs that we have Buncombe County has identified, and who's doing a good job, and who's meeting their numbers as they say they are and has the capability of. You know, and a lot of that's going to be subjective, and we're going to have more decisions to make. You know, it's difficult to cut somebody's funding off. Some of the small organizations don't have grant writers and development people and savvy folks who can go, oh, we'll just do this, you know, and they go, oh my God.
So I would say there's consensus that there's no consensus.
Well,
You know, I could argue both sides.
Exactly,
Yeah,
I think many of us feel the same
Sure.
way. Yeah,
Okay.
we can argue both
Absolutely.
sides. Yeah.
well, and having this conversation and taking it into consideration as we're looking at the quality of the projects and what's needed. I mean, I think that in some ways it may take care of itself. I don't know for sure, but see how we're thinking about how we want to invest here.
I mean, it's not our job to fund programs that aren't working or meeting the needs of our citizens. You know, and so that's where our tough decisions work.
So, as Rachel said, we don't have to make that decision right
And
now.
aren't we glad?
We have some time now. So would folks feel okay with tabling this into the new year, the calendar year? And-
Sarah, is this something that could be asked of commissioners? That is the that at the organizational level, whether a 3-year cap would be appropriate or they oppose it? Could we ask the commissioners themselves that question?
Yes, realistically, if we're tabling this to the beginning of the new calendar year, we're probably tabling it until after we're done with the grant reviews, because that's gonna take up all our time for the next few months. And then by then, we're getting ready to prepare our annual visit or presentation to the commissioners. That I wonder if that's an appropriate venue. When I talked to county management about this potential idea, and it's trade-offs, benefits, impacts. Well, I talked to the assistant county manager who consulted with the county manager, and they decided this shouldn't be a staff only. We should visit with commissioners prior to making a change of this type. So that might give us the time to do it. Is it July?
It's usually August.
August? So we would be able to talk about it in like May, June, July, and get ready for that.
I think that sounds perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
So the only announcement that we have is about the grants fair, which again is on January 10th from 4 to 6 here. And we would love to have one or two folks from this committee attend and be at the Strategic Partnership Grants table if you would like to. I know that folks probably need to look at their calendars and everything, but is there anyone in the room right now who knows that they're available and would want to attend?
What day of the week is it?
It's Wednesday.
Wednesday evening.
Otherwise, we can send out a reminder and folks can just respond that way.
I'd expect to be able to attend and I'd be interested in attending.
I also see Kate's hand.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Great. And we will let everyone know how that goes. Our next meeting, we have January off. Right? So we'll see everybody February 1st in 2024. I hope everybody has a really wonderful holiday.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Everybody,